What would you do if you stumbled upon a digital vault holding the deepest secrets of the world's most hunted man? This isn't the start of a spy novel. It's exactly what happened on the night of May 2nd, 2011. The world awoke to breaking news. Osama Bin Laden, the mastermind of 9/11s and America's most wanted, was dead killed in a daring US raid in Abbottabad, Pakistan. But while headlines screamed about the end of an era, a quieter story was unfolding behind the scenes. As the Navy SEALs swept through Bin Laden's mysterious compound, they didn't just find the fugitive himself. They also discovered a cache of digital devices, battered laptops, cryptic hard drives, boxes of USB sticks, and even handwritten notes, an electronic treasure chest left behind by a man who had changed the course of history. For years, the world had only guesses and grainy videos about Bin Laden's life on the run. Now, thanks to these devices, there was a chance to peer directly into his mind. The significance of this haul can't be overstated. Not only did it promise intelligence about Al-Qaeda's future plans, it offered an unfiltered look at the mundane, personal, and sometimes shocking moments of a man known globally as a symbol of terror. Imagine the weight of holding those drives in your hands, knowing you might uncover the next plot. Or perhaps something far more complicated evidence that the architect of mass murder also spent his days raising chickens and reading poetry with his grandchildren. The digital trail Bin Laden left behind is as human as it is monstrous. And it dares us to ask, can a single hard drive contain both the banality and the horror of history's most infamous villain? In this series, we journey through those files to find out not just who Bin Laden was, but what he became when the world stopped watching. When the Navy SEALs swept through Bin Laden's compound, they expected danger. What they found instead was a digital Pandora's box. Stacked on rickety desks and hidden in bags were battered laptops, tangled chargers, phones with cracked screens, and an array of old-fashioned USB sticks and DVDs. To a casual observer, it looked like forgotten tech clutter. To the CIA, it was the greatest intelligence prize in years. Back in secure labs, analysts realized the true scale of the Hall 5 computer's more than 100 flash drives, cell phones, dozens of DVDs, and even a battered handwritten journal. What began as a messy pile quickly transformed into over 470,000 digital files with a total size of more than 250 gigabytes. A mountain of potential evidence and insight. But what exactly was hidden inside? This wasn't just about tracking terrorist plots. In one folder, analysts found propaganda statements and encrypted messages to Al-Qaeda operatives. In another, they discovered home videos of birthday parties, family meals, and children's poetry competitions. There were Western movies and viral internet clips downloaded for entertainment. Some files were so mundane recipes, jokes, cartoons, it was hard to believe they were part of a fugitive's archive. Real-life story. Dr. Nellie Lahoud, one of the world's leading experts on jihadist documents, described feeling as if she'd stumbled into two parallel worlds. In the same inbox, an email discussing money for a new computer sat right next to instructions for secret meetings and martyrdom operations. It was almost like Bin Laden lived two lives at once, she said. The contrast was surreal. The chaotic digital landscape wasn't just a reflection of Bin Laden's double life. Nearly 20 people lived in the compound, from his wives and children to bodyguards and assistants. Some data belonged to Bin Laden's son, others to his followers. Not everything could be tied directly to him, which meant that even now, years later, some mysteries remain. This complicated the work of intelligence analysts. Every document, every video, every odd meme or encrypted file had to be studied, its origins and meaning. Debated, one file might be a recipe for flatbread, the next, a coded instruction for terror. Sometimes even experts struggle to draw the line between innocent domestic life and hidden evil. But taken together, the archive revealed something no one expected. The mastermind of 9/11 was also in many ways just a man living in boredom, nostalgia, and relentless fear. He worried about family and supplies as much as strategy and global revolution. And in the end, the digital treasure the SEALs seized was as messy, contradictory, and revealing as Bin Laden's own life. Locked away in the Abbottabad compound, Osama Bin Laden and nearly 20 of his family members lived a life that was both surreal and suffocatingly ordinary. While the world imagined him plotting in some cave, the reality was different. Bin Laden was leading a cloistered existence surrounded by wives, children, and grandchildren within a fortress-like home. From the outside, the compound looked like an unremarkable cluster of concrete and high walls. But those walls weren't just for show. They were the first line of defense, topped with barbed wire and closely monitored at all times. No phone lines, no internet. Every window carefully shrouded. Every movement inside and out watched with near-paranoid vigilance. Inside, life was stripped down to basics, almost medieval. The family raised chickens, grew vegetables, and milked cows in the yard. With almost no contact with the outside world, they had to be self-sufficient. Trash was burned on site, supplies were stockpiled, and children learned early not to venture near the fences. For the younger ones, the compound was the only world they knew. They didn't go to school, didn't have friends outside the walls, and spent their days with siblings, cousins, and a handful of trusted adults. Playtime was monitored, and even innocent games were tinged with the sense of ever-present danger. Despite the shadow of fear, there were moments that felt almost normal. Family members took turns cooking, tending the garden, and caring for animals. There were poetry competitions, simple birthday parties, and homemade toys. Home videos recovered from the hard drives show Bin Laden as a grandfather distributing prizes to children for reciting poems and stories. One video captures a scene as mundane as any family anywhere. Children huddled around a small cake. Bin Laden's soft voice congratulating a grandchild for memorizing a verse. But in the same video archive, other clips reveal a darker side. Children learning not just poetry, but also the language of jihad and martyrdom. The routine of daily life was governed by strict rules. Children were forbidden to leave the house except for medical emergencies and never allowed in the yard without adult supervision. Sometimes, surveillance cameras would be turned on, and footage would zoom in on passing helicopters or strangers outside the compound. Every sound, every shadow was a potential threat. As one former analyst put it, Bin Laden's family lived in a golden cage protected from the world, but also prisoners of their father's fears. A former resident later interviewed anonymously described growing up with two kinds of silence. One was the silence of boredom, the other was the silence of terror. Even laughter or a loud voice could bring quick, stern looks from adults. The children learned to adapt, inventing quiet games and developing a deep sense of family loyalty, but also an underlying anxiety that shaped their personalities for years. In many ways, the Abbottabad compound was less a home and more a minimum security prison, one built not by guards but by the man who feared being found. The banality of raising chickens and celebrating birthdays was always shadowed by the knowledge that at any moment the world's deadliest hunters might be outside the gate. The hard drives revealed all this not through manifestos, but through birthday footage, gardening logs, and the patient routines of a family in hiding. In these details, we see both the humanity and the tragedy of life under Bin Laden's shadow, a man whose choices turned home into fortress and fortress into prison. Living in a fortress brings a certain kind of anxiety. For Bin Laden, it wasn't just about physical security. It was about keeping every possible secret locked away, no matter the cost. The digital files revealed the lengths to which he and his family went to avoid detection, and how that endless fear shaped their daily routines. Inside the compound, paranoia ruled everything. Bin Laden refused to have a single phone line or internet cable installed. No satellite TV. No casual conversations with the outside world. Every letter, every flash drive had to be carried in and out by trusted couriers, men who risked their lives to maintain his lifeline to Al-Qaeda and his extended family. Security protocols went far beyond what most people can imagine. Even family members had to use codes and aliases in their correspondence. Bin Laden feared that the smallest slip, a misaddressed letter, an intercepted USB stick, could mean disaster. He was especially distrustful of modern technology, often ridiculing the idea of email encryption, arguing that it was foolish to use American-made tools against American intelligence. The digital archive includes hours of home-shot surveillance footage. Many of these clips seem mundane at first, zooming in on the hills, scanning the sky, or following the movement of a distant helicopter. But to those living inside, these routines were about survival. Every unusual sound outside every passing car triggered a fresh round of anxiety. At times, the family suspected even their own medical devices, worrying that a wife's dental filling might contain a tracking chip. Bin Laden's caution bordered on obsession. He believed with some reason that the world's most powerful intelligence agencies were closing in. His routines were meticulously planned, walking the courtyard at precise times, sleeping in different rooms, and always keeping an escape plan ready. Psychologists who later studied the compound's files noted a kind of institutional paranoia, a mentality that over years shaped the behavior of everyone inside. Children learned to lower their voices and avoid windows, and adults became adept at scanning for threats that might never appear. Yet the hard drives show the costs of this secrecy. Relationships strained by mistrust, children isolated, and a family living in constant tension. Even the smallest comforts, a letter from a distant relative, a favorite cartoon, a recipe from home, had to be smuggled inside, inspected, and sometimes decoded. Real-life example. One letter from Bin Laden's chief of staff asked almost pleadingly if they could use email with encryption for easier communication. Bin Laden's reply was curt, absolutely not to him. Digital contact was always a risk, never a convenience. And so every piece of outside information, from terrorist orders to birthday greetings, entered the compound the old-fashioned way, hand-delivered, sometimes hidden in the most unlikely places. In the end, this web of secrecy was both Bin Laden's shield and his undoing. It protected him for years, but also isolated him from reality. The man who once broadcast his message to the world now trusted almost no one and feared almost everything. The hard drives captured it, all the endless routines, the coded messages, the blurry surveillance videos, and the mounting sense that no matter how careful they were, time was running out. Not everything found on Bin Laden's hard drives was as sinister as analysts first expected. Hidden among encrypted files and stern instructions were surprising traces of ordinary and even playful digital life. The archive contained hundreds of gigabytes of videos and downloads, and not all of them were propaganda analysts uncovered pirated Hollywood movies like Ice Age episodes of Tom and Jerry Japanese anime and viral YouTube clips. Family members would sometimes gather to watch these on an old computer, a rare window into the outside world for the children trapped inside. Some files were pure entertainment, funny cat videos, cartoons, or popular viral moments like Charlie Bit My Finger. These odd juxtapositions challenged the stereotype of a life devoted solely to plotting terror. Even the world's most wanted man, it seemed, had moments of boredom or nostalgia. But the oddest discovery came when agents realized some of the digital content, especially pornography and certain video files, may have served a darker purpose. Intelligence experts believe that Al-Qaeda and other terror groups used a method called steganography, hiding secret messages inside image or video files. By embedding instructions within seemingly innocent content, couriers could smuggle information past even the most suspicious eyes. This means that a seemingly random cartoon or meme might in reality contain encrypted data operational instructions or codes for attacks. It's a method that blends in perfectly with the cluttered digital lives. Most people lead a cat video or a kids movie could be harmless, or it could be deadly serious. For the families living in the compound, Western pop culture was a curious escape. Children who had never set foot in a public playground could laugh at animated animals and slapstick humor, blissfully unaware that some of their entertainment may have been a mask for covert operations. Analysts were forced to treat every file as a potential clue. They had to ask, is this just a cartoon or is it a message? Is this home video truly innocent or does it contain something more? The work was painstaking and the line between normality and conspiracy was always blurred. Real life parallel. One analyst described the strange feeling of watching a home video of kids singing birthday songs only to discover embedded in the file a coded instruction for an Al-Qaeda courier. It was the ultimate collision of innocence and malice, the banality of evil in digital form. In the end, Bin Laden's hard drives didn't just reveal the horrors of a terrorist mastermind. They also showed the ordinary moments and the surreal ways in which everyday digital life can be weaponized. Bin Laden's hard drives reveal not just a man of violence, but also a master manipulator of faith and symbols. Despite his image as a religious scholar, he had little formal training in Islamic theology. Yet he positioned himself as a kind of prophet issuing decrees interpreting scripture and instructing his followers on matters of doctrine and jihad. His correspondence and recorded speeches show a calculated effort to justify violence using religious language. Bin Laden openly admitted that Islam prohibits the killing of innocents. Yet in the very next breath, he would claim that extraordinary political circumstances permitted exceptions. This distortion of faith became one of his most powerful weapons. His writings often reference historical Islamic figures, the Crusades, and periods of perceived oppression. He cast himself and his followers as warriors defending Islam, even as his actions were condemned by most Islamic scholars worldwide. This selective reading of scripture using cherry-picked verses to incite violence created a warped ideology that inspired a generation of extremists. Personal commentary. This approach is not unique to bin Laden. Throughout history, many leaders, religious and political alike, have twisted sacred texts to serve their ambitions. What set bin Laden apart was the scale of his reach. Through digital files, audio messages, and viral videos, he became a digital-era evangelist of terror, able to radicalize followers far beyond his physical reach. For the children and young adults inside the compound, Bin Laden's worldview was inescapable. Home videos capture him coaching grandchildren on poetry about martyrdom and war. Even in moments meant for celebration or bonding, the themes of violence and sacrifice were never far away. Analysts also noticed that bin Laden was intensely aware of his public image. He carefully styled his appearance, dyeing his beard, dressing in a manner reminiscent of early Islamic leaders to reinforce his authority. Behind the scenes, he reviewed footage of himself, monitored news coverage, and wrote letters about maintaining a humble and pious appearance. Real-life example. One letter addressed to a senior jihadi leader advised, "When you speak to the public, do so with humility. Dress, simply model yourself after the Prophet and his companions." Yet the same files show bin Laden privately obsessed with how he was portrayed, proof of the contradiction between his self-styled humility and his hunger for legacy. In the end, the hard drives expose bin Laden not just as a terrorist, but as a self-conscious performer, a man who weaponized faith image and even family life for the sake of his holy war. His manipulation of religion left a legacy of violence, confusion, and tragedy that outlived him, continuing to shape hearts and minds long after his death. Inside the walls of the Abbottabad compound, family life was always shaped by the presence and ideology of Osama bin Laden. For his wives, children, and grandchildren, every routine was filtered through his worldview. Even moments of apparent normalcy, poetry recitals, birthday celebrations, and bedtime stories were often tinged with the themes of sacrifice, loyalty, and jihad. Bin Laden had a large family. He fathered over 20 children, several of whom lived with him in the compound, along with grandchildren and at least 3 wives. Home videos recovered from the hard drives reveal both warmth and indoctrination. There are scenes of bin Laden smiling and gentle handing out small prizes to children for reciting poems, not just about love or nature, but about martyrdom and battle. From an early age, children in the compound were exposed to stories of struggle and self-sacrifice. Instead of fairy tales, their bedtime stories might revolve around the glories of jihad or the honor of dying for a cause. Family rituals included competitions in reciting verses about loyalty to Islam and the bravery of those who fight for it. While these traditions fostered unity and discipline, they also carried a heavy psychological toll. Children learned to view the outside world with suspicion and to see violence as a natural part of their family's history. Some, as they grew older, would become active participants in extremist networks, proof of how powerful generational indoctrination can be. One video clip from the hard drives shows a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, standing tall in front of the family as he recites a poem glorifying martyrdom. The adults, including bin Laden himself, beam with pride. A moment later, the boy's playing quietly with a sibling. The contrast between innocence and indoctrination, both stark and heartbreaking. For bin Laden, family was never just about kinship. His correspondence shows that he expected complete loyalty, not just from his followers, but also from his children and wives. He involved them in propaganda, sought their help in writing public statements, and at times sent them messages coded with operational instructions. Yet behind the loyalty was also fear and loss. Several of bin Laden's children would eventually die in violent conflicts. His wives and daughters would spend years under house arrest or in hiding their lives, marked by the consequences of his choices. Interviews with children who escaped extremist households, whether bin Laden's or others, often reveal the scars of this upbringing. Many speak of struggling to trust, to feel safe, or to live outside the shadow of their family's past. The impact of indoctrination lingers long after the walls of any compound are torn down. In the end, the files from Abbottabad are not just the story of one man, but of an entire family drawn into a cycle of violence. They remind us that the legacy of extremism is rarely confined to a single generation. The seeds planted by leaders like Bin Laden can grow for decades, spreading pain and conflict long after they are gone. For all his talk of humility, Osama bin Laden was intensely preoccupied with his own image. The hard drives seized from Abbottabad reveal not just a commander of terror, but also a man obsessed with the way he was perceived by both his followers and his enemies. Among the files were dozens of documentaries, news segments, and propaganda clips about bin Laden himself. He collected footage, recorded broadcasts, and stored copies of interviews and statements. Analysts quickly realized that bin Laden was not just a consumer of media, but an active curator of his own myth. He carefully monitored international coverage tracking how he was portrayed and what messages reached the world. Bin Laden wanted to be seen as both a spiritual leader and a revolutionary icon, a blend of ancient religious authority and modern resistance fighter. This obsession extended to his physical appearance. He dyed his beard to maintain a youthful look, dressed in simple but symbolic robes, and staged his few public appearances with careful attention to detail. This self-consciousness is hardly unique among leaders, but in bin Laden's case it highlights a deep contradiction. While he preached modesty and sacrifice, he secretly relished the role of global celebrity. The myth of bin Laden was carefully built not just by the media, but by the man himself. In a sense, he became both director and star in his own ongoing propaganda film. Behind closed doors, he worked to maintain control over every aspect of his narrative. He reviewed tapes, critiqued translations, and sent notes to allies about how to present themselves in public. This fixation on legacy was a driving force in his final years. As the outside world closed in, bin Laden's universe shrank to the boundaries of his compound and the screens showing his own legend playing out. One recovered video shows bin Laden reviewing an old news segment about himself. He pauses, rewinds, and shakes his head at a mistranslation. Nearby, a stack of newspapers headlines his name in bold letters. For a moment, he appears less like a fugitive and more like a movie director intent on perfecting his own story. In the end, the digital legacy bin Laden left behind is a study in contradictions, the image of a humble cleric carefully manufactured by a man who craved global notoriety, a revolutionary who became isolated and obsessed with his reputation. His myth lived on even as his life faded behind the compound's walls. As the years went by, the Abbottabad compound transformed from a place of relative comfort to a prison of paranoia. The walls grew higher not just physically but psychologically. Bin Laden's world became smaller, his trust limited to only the closest family and aides. With every passing month, the sense of danger pressing in from the outside grew more suffocating. Every routine in the compound reflected mounting anxiety. Bin Laden rarely slept in the same room 2 nights in a row. Escape plans were revised constantly, and secret routes out of the compound were discussed in code. Even his own family members were subjected to scrutiny. At one point, he worried that a wife who had spent time in Iran might have a tracking device embedded in her dental work. His relationships with longtime allies and operatives became more strained. Some vanished, some were killed or captured, and others simply drifted away as the Al-Qaeda network fractured under pressure from global counterterrorism efforts. Bin Laden's correspondence became increasingly defensive and isolated, a man both hunted and haunted. The hard drives captured this slow, unraveling correspondence, expressing distrust's surveillance routines, growing more elaborate, and a growing sense that the world outside was closing in. The last home videos from the compound reveal an atmosphere of nervousness and fatigue. Even the children's laughter seemed muted, the adults' faces tense. In one particularly telling video, Bin Laden can be seen anxiously reviewing security camera feeds late at night. The slightest unfamiliar sound outside triggers a check of the perimeter. Letters recovered from this period are filled with warnings, suspicions, and urgent instructions to family and lieutenants to move or hide. Despite all precautions, Bin Laden was losing control. US intelligence had been closing in for years, slowly assembling the puzzle of his whereabouts through intercepted messages, courier tracking, and painstaking surveillance. The very secrecy that kept him alive now made it difficult for him to communicate command or escape. On May 2, 2011, the walls finally closed in for good. US Navy SEALs launched a night raid on the Abbottabad compound. Within minutes, Bin Laden was dead. His family was left behind, shocked and disoriented. The world's most wanted man, who had shaped the course of history for a decade, died not in battle or on the run, but surrounded by relatives, digital clutter, and a life reduced to constant hiding. The digital legacy left in that compound, unfinished emails, unplayed videos, abandoned birthday plans, became the final testimony of a man undone by his own paranoia and the relentless pursuit of justice. The discovery and analysis of Osama bin Laden's hard drives did more than just close a chapter in the war on terror. It forced the world to confront the complexity and contradictions of evil and to ask how a single life could contain such extreme acts of monstrous violence, but also mundane routines, human connections, and private doubts. As researchers pored over the files, they saw more than the story of a terrorist mastermind. They witnessed the daily details of a man who spent years in self-imposed exile, building not only a global network of fear, but also a fragile world within his compound walls. The hard drives held everything from encrypted attack plans to birthday party footage from propaganda manifestos to recipes for home-cooked meals. What stood out most was the extent to which fear and control defined bin Laden's existence. His paranoia shaped every choice, isolating his family, distrusting even close allies, and seeing danger in every shadow. This environment bred more fear, passing on suspicion, anxiety, and even violence to the next generation. The digital archive also revealed the reach of bin Laden's manipulation through selective readings of religion, careful image management, and personal charisma. He was able to inspire and corrupt people who never met him in person. His myth became a tool drawing followers to a cause that ultimately left only destruction in its wake. Yet perhaps the most sobering lesson from the hard drives is not just about bin Laden himself, but about the age we live in. The files are a stark reminder that technology can amplify both the best and the worst of human nature. The same hard drive that stored family memories also carried blueprints for terror. In a digital world, the lines between innocence and evil are often blurred. In the wake of the file's release, some former followers reported feeling disillusioned, not by bin Laden's failures, but by his contradictions. They saw a man obsessed with his image, cut off from reality, trapped in fear. For some, it was the beginning of a break with extremism. For others, a warning about the cost of blind loyalty. Ultimately, the legacy left behind in that compound is one of devastation, broken families, ruined futures, and a region still grappling with the aftermath. Bin Laden may have dreamed of being a legendary warrior, but he left behind a world marked by pain, division, and ongoing conflict. The story told by Bin Laden's hard drives is not just about him. It's a warning about the seductive power of simple narratives, the danger of unchecked paranoia, and the responsibility of questioning leaders no matter how charismatic or certain they seem. It's a call to look beneath the surface to recognize how ordinary moments can exist alongside great cruelty, and to remember that evil often hides behind the familiar. When we look at the digital footprints left by even the most notorious villains, we're reminded that history is shaped not just by grand gestures, but by everyday choices and compromises. To build a better future, we must confront both the darkness and the humanity in ourselves and others, and refuse to be seduced by myths no matter how convincing they seem. Bin Laden changed the course of history, but not for the better. The true lesson of his legacy is the importance of empathy, vigilance, and the courage to break the cycle of fear and hatred.